We're going to go over a few big picture elements in development. This course in particular doesn't dive deep into development because we have other courses that cover that. But this is more of the producer perspective of what do you do if you're boots on the ground getting work done to make the production happen versus getting it funded. So I want you to think about that with this. This is very superficial on this part. Then we're going to get into organization of the film crew. So you're thinking a little bit about who the people are who come on board, which informs your breakdowns and your schedule. And we'll go over a little bit on breakdowns in this. So the very, very broad overview in development is you need to really just put together enough materials to be able to greenlight moving forward at each phase. You first start with a small amount of information and keep building. You don't do all of the work before you decide to move forward. One of the reasons that is you have so many steps to get to a place where you actually have a product that you can sell, right? You aren't making a proposal, you aren't making a script, you aren't making a schedule, you're not making a production to sell, you're selling a final edited film that's been distributed and people are watching, or whatever it is. It's the same process, be it a YouTube video or a theatrical release film. There is a long chain of steps to actually get to success. So you've got to have a lot of small green light decision points, or else you will drive yourself insane and overwork yourself and become exhausted. So you don't want to get totally locked down to where you don't move forward. But these are kind of some of the processes in this overview where each time as a producer, you have a bit of a green light process to make sure, should I even move this forward? So the first one is just the idea for a film, be it from you or a writer or whoever. And do they have chain of title? Do they actually have the rights to even move the idea forward? Then you get to kind of the one sheet concept level, your log line, very brief synopsis. It will get changed, but is it enough to actually say, hey, this has legs? And you might run it past a few people and see, is it just me in my world that I think this is interesting, or could it move forward? Then some of these kind of go in different orders depending on what your focus is. If you're a writer, you're likely to work on a script first. If you're more of a proposal type, you might do your pitch deck or your proposal. But all of these pieces generally get made before it moves forward to, actually going into production or even pre-production. So you'd have a pitch deck and possibly some soft pitches to see who is interested. If I make this film, do you want to distribute it? Do you want to fund this? Where are you? The proposal, like producer to producer, goes over, which is kind of a business plan light proposal. The script itself. Guys, you're not likely to attach actors to a film without a script, but you may not want to go so far as developing a script if the project doesn't have great legs. A sizzle reel might get shot to show to investors and to distributors some idea of the film. You don't always have a sizzle reel, and it definitely varies. This is more the feature film model. At some point, if everything is moving forward, after you have your full script, you will need a real legitimate business plan and financing plan and attachments of who are the director, the actors, those people who are actually going to be on board on this project. All right, so we're going to really dive into breaking down a script and scheduling it. In order to do that, you need to know a little bit about who the people are who are going to be working on this thing so that you have some idea how long it will take and what resources they need. So we're going to step back a little from the micro of breakdowns and schedules and look at film crew organization. Overall, you have above the line and below the line. Above the line are the creative decision makers. Below the line are kind of the people working on the film who don't have as much creative input. Even though everybody has creative input, to some extent their work affects what's on the screen and what's captured. But these are the basic formula. The producers, which include executive producer, producer. Line producer doesn't usually have a lot of creative input, but the line producer manages the budget. Your director works with the director of photography, the cast, and the writer, and story development gets really into the triangle of producer, director, writer, and development. And the director of photography then has the whole crew. Sorry, I forgot to silence that. Director of photography is in charge of the visual aspect of the scene, and there's a lot of interplay in these. This is very broad strokes, guys. And in the producing world, under production management, you have a world of people. As a entry-level producer, you're far more likely to have a job in one of these categories, like under production management. Office PA or a set production assistant is the most likely entry level, but all of those things fall under production management. So you can see there's a lot. This is a bit of a big picture from a blog I found that had a decent outline, right? So take a look at that if you're not familiar with the way a film crew operates. Click on that link and look over this in more depth. But from a producer, director, dynamic perspective, if the producer is not on set, to an extent, the first assistant director represents them to make sure safety is followed. So it's an interesting dynamic between a good functional first AD director dynamic where the first AD manages in a lot of ways set operations, making sure that what's needed for the next shot is coming so the director can stay focused in the moment with what they're directing with actors and camera in that moment. And then if there's a problem, it can go through the first AD to get to the director if the director needs to be discussed that information. But in many ways, a first AD operates more in a producer capacity than a director capacity. It's just something that I think is interesting. So think about that and all the people who you're juggling in this Tetris to make a film. When people get hired, the production manager or line producer usually hires them. You generally hire the department heads first so that they can give input for hiring crew. Just tip, contact references. Do not trust whatever they say. People will pretty quickly just either be glowing about the person who listed them as a reference or silent, or possibly say, hey, you've got a real concern here. Do keep in mind personality matters, especially if you're shooting a feature film or a series. It's long hours and it can be stressful. In pre-production, when you guys move forward into there, deal memos are signed in a certain window of time because you want it to be early enough to not cause delays, but not so early that there'll be payments if production falls through. So you want to make sure your production is really happening, so you're not on the hook for taking a chunk of somebody's life that they can't give to somebody else to work on another project and can mess up their life. But you also want to have it early enough to reserve them. So there's kind of a window. And I feel like this is obvious. Some departments start sooner than others. Production design often has to start very early on some productions so they can get ready. First AD is often hired near the end of pre-production. So it's the production coordinators who are coordinating this, right? Production manager and the line producer. Going over some of the more reasonable indie crew film sizes, you often will have a producer, director, first AD who often also slates because you don't have a second AC often. So they kind of call the roll and slate at the same time. Production designer, someone on hair, makeup, and wardrobe, ideally multiple people on those, but often it gets compressed. And somebody who is managing locations and crafty and meals. That's kind of your production chunk. Then you have your director of photography, who's often the cam op, a first AC who might be pulling focus or just managing lenses and helping that director of photography. Gaffer and a key grip, sometimes the same person. Gaffer's more lighting. Key grip is the stuff that moves and the stuff that supports. Sound mixer, often sound mixer boom op combined. Ideally, you'd have a second boom op. Often doesn't happen. If the director's also the producer, I highly recommend a line producer or production manager because your director producer is going to struggle to make some of those logistical decisions and stay in the moment while filming. At least that's my personal experience when I'm that person. Now, if you have a really small crew for like ENG, electronic news gathering, or a small reality TV, it's often just a field producer director who also probably slates and does production design, cam ops who also do lighting, however many cameras you have in play, that number of cam ops, and a sound mixer. If it's interview only, quite frequently sound is run straight to camera and the camera person must also run sound. It's never ideal, but it happens, just being real. Often your crew is 2 people, the producer and the cam op sound person, for the really small crews for that style filming. Actors, the production manager or line producer really have little to do with selecting them other than finalizing paperwork. Casting director, if you have one, gives their top choices to the director and producer, and then the producer negotiates, then the production manager just completes the paperwork. So just kind of giving you guys a picture of how this world often works. While you're thinking about these breakdowns and schedules, and considering your cast and crew, if you were to be moving forward a production, these are people, right? And we as Christians should be thinking about people and taking care of them. They need to be fed, they need to be housed. Films can be very high stress and high pressure, so you don't want to be working people to the bitter edge and not thinking about ways that they can decompress. Like if you're putting them in a sketchy hotel where they're not going to sleep well, they're not going to be able to handle stress and pressure well. And they are real life human beings who may have people who have died in their lives or are going through stress, or they have kids or parents or spouses. They're still real human beings. Personalities can conflict. It is a question of how well do people work together when you hire them, instead of just moving forward based on resumes. Non-disclosure agreements for cast and crew to sign are pretty typical, that you don't want them talking about things outside of the timeline you give them or parameters. And I would advise just be public with whatever your social media policy is. A lot of productions is please, please, please blast all over the place and tag our pages. Or don't say anything, but just be clear so that there's not a question mark. And keep organized what you're doing. We're going to go over production Bibles. I've got a template I'll give you. It's basically all your information in one place for your contact lists and your schedules and everything else. Make sure you complete contact lists and keep them tracking. And day-to-day reports will help you to figure out who needs to be where when. We'll go over these more as we go. I just want to give you guys a picture of where we're going. This is really more about the logistics of being a boots on the ground producer than a executive producer type who is making decisions about what films to make and what films not to. There are other classes that cover that. All right, so getting into some of those nuts and bolts, the script tagging and breakdown process. I have a sample script for you guys. Please use that unless you have a script that meets the parameters that you actually plan on making. Don't just grab some other script because you like it better, because I'll be able to give you good feedback on the script I know well. So everybody needs to know how to break down a script. There are some people who it's their primary responsibility, but then each department also breaks down the script. So your first part is just how much is in a scene. We all say it in eighths, just like the example that I put here, 4 quarters, 5 dimes, 5 nickels, that's $1.75. So could you say $1 3/4? Sure, but there's formats. In our world, it's in eighths. And an eighth of a page is just literally the page folded up in eighths, and you estimate it. So you'll do that as part of your process. First thing you do is just read the script. I always read the script first, just so I get an idea of where it's going and what elements may be important down the road and what are just kind of like throwaways that a scriptwriter used a lot of words. I'll read it again. I'll make sure it's in standard screenplay format and isn't in some wonky formatting because you want to fix it before you get started. Then you tag elements. So you have your script, you've broken it into those 8th pages, so that's just drawing a line over it for each scene. Then you start tagging things. I always like to do a paper tagging first with colored pencils where I circle elements. You can also tag within software where you highlight and select, and a lot of them will do a lot of it automatically for you. The reason I like to do it first with paper is it helps my brain to process what's there, and then I will hold up my script and check it against what I have on the screen in software. I always move to software, but I start on the page. These are the general script breakdown categories that Studio Binder uses. So you just circle your elements in this, right? If you have a cast member, you circle them purple, extras, green. You can do whatever colors you want. These are just some of the standard ones out there. So you can see here, the sample script you guys have here is a page of a breakdown. I always put on the title page where I can pull it to the side my coding for whatever I was doing with colors, even if it's exactly what I normally do, so somebody else can see it. So you can see the first scene, Interior Uber Day, it's 6/8 long, and you can see Cooper Keller is circled as cast, cell phone is circled as prop. That's what you do. If there's an item that is referenced that you're afraid will get missed, you can do what we did. We wrote Uber car on the side and circled it, okay? The next page actually went on for more pages and was 4 7/8 pages long. So while you do this, a couple of rules to keep in mind. Set dressing dresses the set. So like if it's just set dressing, you usually don't include those elements. The production design team will look over set dressing and figure those out. So you don't usually tag that. Food is always in props, unless you have a different protocol on your set. Only underline or circle each element once per scene. You don't need to do it over and over because this is going to go onto a breakdown sheet that will make sure it's there for the scene. Watch out for items that carry over from scene to scene but are not explicitly stated in the script. So this in the script you guys are going to look at, that might be in the diner. What is stuff that was mentioned in the diner, then it goes to another scene and then back to the diner? Well, you want to make sure that those elements are in your breakdowns so that they aren't forgotten. What happens if you don't shoot all the diner in one day and you got to come back? Well, the breakdowns help you remember what you need to get the coverage you need. I always make additional notes in the right-hand margin so it's all in the same place. Again, breakdown categories. So you make your 8ths, you look at your scenes, you circle or underline, and start to categorize it. It's wash, rinse, repeat, guys. When you're numbering scenes, I do this all at one time so I don't accidentally skip things. Always go in numerical order. You place your scene numbers to the left beside the slug line and to the right after. A lot of script software will do this automatically, and that is preferable because it helps take out the risk that 2 people will have numbered their scenes differently. Somebody may have missed something. Later, when you have revisions, if new scenes get inserted, they would get a like 1A because it's a new scene after scene 1. So with your 8ths, you draw a dividing line between each scene. Every page should have 8/8. This number really does not matter to be precise. You just consider how long it will take to shoot a scene if you're in doubt, but every page should add up to 8/8. So if you have a 120-page script, it'd be, you know, let me do easier math because I'm not a math person. You have a 10-page script, it will have a total of 80/8. And the way you refer to things is always as a mixed number, so like 1 2/8, not 10/8 or 1 1/4. It's just the language we use. Now everybody pretty much does digital tagging. It's pretty simple. You highlight it and tag it in your software. Again, I like to write it first on a piece of paper just so I am double checking myself. So to get to your breakdown sheets, and you guys have a template for a sheet you could use, You tag your script, and then one per scene you fill in a breakdown sheet. It's an organizational step, right? Studio Binder automates this really well if you're using that for your tagging, so it can create a breakdown export. It helps as a producer, your producer team, generally your first AD would do this, so that you have some idea of what you need. And then each department should be doing their own breakdowns where they really think about what they need. Small indie projects, sometimes it doesn't happen. It's only the AD and everybody's going off of those breakdowns. Don't skip them.